And this is Bob and Aimee Rasmussen. Bob and I have been friends since 1973, and we went to the same university together, and then became friends. And we were involved in ministry in France in the summer of '74, and then we did a lot of music together. Bob plays trumpet, I play piano and guitar. And so we were doing that, but we were friends in college and in seminary, and we both served in pastoral work, and we stayed in touch over all these years. And Bob has also, he's an artist. So Bob loves, he's a ministry leader. He focuses now on a ministry that that welcomes refugees and immigrants, having served in Africa for many years as a missionary in Kenya. And so he leads an organization called Near Frontiers. Aimee and Bob have been married only a few years, and second marriages, and fantastic for each other. And I'm very, very, very happy that Aimee is joining us as well. Also an artist, also a different skill set as a pastoral counselor. And so one other thought here is that what we've seen is that our Creator God invites us to explore beauty in all of our lives. With intentionality, we can discover new media and deeper insights into our spirituality. So in this conversation, Bob and Aimee will remind us of the value of new and complementary art forms, and how our life rhythms enhance or detract from creativity. So, dear friends, I want to introduce dear friends to you, Bob and Aimee Rasmussen. Take it away.
Hello, and it's good to be with you. We've been enjoying these meetings for about 4 months, so we're rather new to your fellowship, but we've been enjoying it and learning from the conversation, and we hope today will be just that, a interactive conversation around some common themes that I think we all will share. So why don't you just say hello, and then we'll go to the PowerPoint so they don't have to look at us anymore.
I felt a year ago, Zoom and COVID allowed us to connect through ELF, and I would have probably never had the joy of being with you all. And remember, that was May of last year, and we hadn't seen very many people, like many of us, during COVID, and it was just a delight for our souls to be in that ELF conversation. And so likewise, these monthly meetings have been just a good way for our souls to find space. So thank you for inviting us into your community.
So if we can go to this PowerPoint. Well, we want to talk about this idea of everyday art in the margins. And that's because, as Chuck has said, we are both enjoying our art journey in the gaps of our lives on weekends or evenings, and because we both work full time in our ministries. And so maybe this will relate to some of you who are also in this kind of journey.
So this is a picture of a sunset a couple, probably 6 weeks ago. And I am part of a spiritual direction group, and we are learning together each month. We have a new disciple process. And this process was, you're supposed to look daily at the sunset. Problem in our area is that there's fog in January, so I had not seen very many sunsets. So Bob and I took a drive, and this sunset was what was before us. And I said to him, I said, do you know what's so amazing about the sunset is it is setting on us and everyone that is viewing it. And it didn't decide if we were worthy to have this glorious view. It just set on us. And I said, isn't that the beauty of God's grace, is that he doesn't choose, are we worthy or not worthy of his love, his mercy, or salvation, that it just is. And so this just became that moment where we saw a sunset in a new light. And that has been this ongoing journey in my own soul of both receiving art and expressing through art, is that really that is a gift that all of us have access to. It doesn't choose if we follow Christ specifically, but that art and beauty from a creator is something that he longs for all of us. And any other words?
Yeah. We're just sharing really simple lessons that are really elementary, but sometimes there's clarity that comes with doing that. One of the things that as we've been married just 3 years, and we started taking some online art tutorials, and we were doing the same one that I was choosing because I liked it. But over time, Aimee said, this isn't really, helping me. And so we just progressed, and she began exploring with styles of her own. So this is her painting on the left and one of mine on the right. And you can just see that we're finding ways that we're comfortable with our own kind of expressions.
This right here is a photo of a local lake, and we are camping. That's one of the things we enjoy doing together. But when we first started dating, actually I think it was our first date, Bob arrived with 2 spiral bound kind of watercolor notebooks, knowing that we both enjoyed watercolor. And he said, what if we took a scene and we both, did a watercolor and then journal and share it. So it's been a pattern for us from that very first time. I think we're in our 2nd notebook. We wonder what our children will think someday of all these little spiral bound notebooks, but it's been a really helpful way for us to engage what is around us, but it also helps connect us back to the creator, as well as seeing that each individual person has a different perspective on the same scene. And it's just been, it's been both a joy to join in that, but also it has helped us not take things too seriously. So it's been just a joy. This is just another expression for myself. As we shared as a counselor, I do a lot of individual work with people, but also within our church occasionally will have been asked to do a sermon. And in this summer, they asked me to do a sermon in Corinthians, and I had just a block. I knew that God was inviting me to say something beyond what I was initially coming up. I was really stuck. People call it writer's block, whatever. I was just stuck. And all of a sudden I thought, well, I wonder if I expressed what I'm trying to say through art, if maybe I would access it from a different angle. And sure enough, that's what happened. So I started having kind of visual idea of what I was trying to say. And before I knew it, I sketched it and then I watercolored it. And I ended up using this bit of art as a template for the sermon. Later, they said they wished I had shared that at church, but really it just helped unlock me. And I find that that right brain creative part of creating does take us from that linear locked place and really allows us to create. So we're kind of sharing some of our learnings along the way as art has been an expression for us. For you, honey?
Yeah, along this line, I'm trying to move beyond just doing a nice watercolor of an English village. but to express some of the things that are meaningful to me. So again, this is simple, but it's a part of our learning. And so one of the things that I love to express is my experience in Africa and the beauty of the people and the places and the chaos of the place and the people and the depth. And another aspect is I've been in the last 3-4 years growing in my love and participation in jazz. And I've learned that it's a living thing. I didn't realize how spontaneous jazz is. There are jazz bands that have music and they play the part that's written, similar to classical or popular music. But I've learned that jazz is a living thing that makes itself up as it goes. And so I've begun trying to depict that in art. And it's difficult because I'm terrible at painting faces. So I have to keep my figures a little distant so I don't have to get into the features of their faces. But I'm enjoying this practice. This is one that I want to share with you a little bit, called The Elegant Woman. And I took this from a photo online of a refugee camp in northern Nigeria of internally displaced Muslims. And I also enjoy writing. And I wrote a poem with this one that I wanted to share with you. She was elegant, tall and slender, regal and red. She might have become one of those African models walking a fashion runway in London for all to admire. But this lady stood where no lady should, in flooded camp of tents, far from her village and kettle. May she go home soon, when hostilities calm and school teachers with guns need to return and feed their families. Why must we fight over land and cattle? Why preserve old hatreds? Why must a woman of worth walk through brown puddles? Oh God, part the waters, make a way. I'm launching into a few paintings of Bethlehem. It's been last November, Amy and I got to go to the Holy Land, and we took a tour, and most tours show you the biblical and geographical sites of Israel, but we intentionally tagged on 3 days in Palestine because that's an important part of the Holy Land. And so we stayed with, we were hosted by a Palestinian Arab pastor in Bethlehem, and we saw some of the angst of living behind a wall. And so I want to try to depict some of the longing of the Palestinians. I think my next painting is going to be, did you know there's a hotel in Bethlehem called the Walled Off Hotel? Not Waldorf, but Walled Off. And there's an adjacent, probably a 50-foot high concrete wall. As Chuck mentioned, I've also been blessed to play the trumpet for a lot of years and in jazz more lately. And we had an opportunity this last year to experiment with this a little bit differently.
So I am not a musician. I do love people. And so this is where music and people join together. As Bob discussed, there was a group that had been practicing or coming together every Tuesday night with jazz. Well, then COVID hit and everybody went back, wasn't seeing each other. When the weather started getting better, and in our area, we could start being out in some mixed groups as long as we were outside with limited numbers. So he asked the jazz group just to come in and jam on our grass, our front lawn. And so we did that one Tuesday. And out of that, our neighbors started coming out and listening. And then we started, some of the different members started inviting friends, and we would meet on the grass together on Tuesday evenings. What was amazing about that is he described it, jazz is never the same. The crowd was never the same. In our final jazz night, we had a young man come through our neighborhood. We still are not sure how he found us, but he was on his way to Wyoming, which is in middle America. And he said, I haven't heard jazz like this since I was in France, which was, that was quite nice. But he said it was a jazz club. And he said, what I love about jazz is it's never the same. And I love that I'm here experiencing jazz and here in, California. But out of that space, he really then shared his story. And that's what I find so often in the opportunities of art, creative expression, and time and space and people, is that people in the presence of a creative atmosphere often do want to share what's going on as they experience the art. And we just found that this was a natural place of hospitality in a neighborhood that had been walled off actually to hospitality. Here's another picture of it. We brought food in because food also relaxes everybody, does it not? But you'll see COVID spacing, and but it was a great night. It was just one of the nights that captured people coming.
Just think of your art as a form of hospitality, where beginning in your heart, you open up your life and your space, your energy to host others, to come and view or listen. And you share a space with them, and they contribute to you. All of us as artists, there's something, we don't write a book to put in our closet. We write it to be shared, and art is a form of hospitality, and it's healing to us. We need the community around our art, and the vulnerability of putting our art out for others to see is a form of love and of hospitality. And so it's wonderful to think of it in that way. But healing and joy become ours when we're vulnerable to share our art. One life lesson that jazz teaches me is the complementary nature of the discipline of our art and the improvisation in our art. I think this applies to every form of art. And it's certainly been a stretching experience for me. I've always been one who could play by ear, but rarely have I been on stage with no one else really the focus, as jazz does to the instrument that's improvising, or the voice that's improvising. It's risky, it's daring. And I put a little thing in here: out of Black history in America, blues were a chance to pour out a life story. As I've been learning about jazz, oftentimes the instrumentalist is, through his emotion, telling a story of what's in his heart, or she's singing about her angst, her sadness, her hope, her longing. And the improvisation gives us the opportunity to bring ourselves and our own story into our art form.
One of the things is when words are stifled, either through, sometimes we stifle our own words because we don't have the freedom to say what we need to say. Sometimes it's something that is done to us. Our words are not free. there have been history in our American history. There have been places where Blacks were not able to say what they needed to say about their story. And so this expression through music or through art became a means. And I think that's a beauty of this, of our God creator, that he gave us a way to express ourselves, not just in words alone, but through a creative expression. So one of our experiences has been being intentional about Sabbath, because we both work mostly on Sundays through our local church. Our Sabbath starts on Friday at noon and goes to Saturday at noon. And in that, we intentionally take a rest from our everyday work. And what that process has been like is, as we take a rest from our everyday work, we actually surrender that our God, our creator, actually continues to be at work when we're not, which sounds like that's very clear, right? That God is always at work. But the challenge of Sabbath is when you really take the opportunity to rest from your everyday work, you do surrender to the creator that he will continue on. And we have found that in intentional Sabbath rest, that we have had more space for creativity. Both of us have had sabbaticals where we've taken a longer rest from work. Myself, it was 2 months. Bob, it was 5 months. Those ended up being at about midway through, creativity really started to flow. And we realized that our hearts needed that intentionally week by week. So Sabbath rest has been a place where we have noticed creativity expand.
Let's just suggest some ways that Sabbath aids creativity. What are some things that can happen on a Sabbath day that enliven your creative impulses?
I think that when we intentionally Sabbath and we're in a place of rest, we notice things more. We're more observant about what's going on around us, or just the beauty of creation to inspire us, all sorts of things, but just being in a place of being able to be more observant.
It's also the removal of noise as well. Just, oh, am I coming through? It's the removal of noise and of maybe of people as well. So it feels almost like what you've been saying before about coming away from the hierarchy of who's better and who, you know, the comparison stuff and the pressures we put on ourselves to perform and achieve. It's almost taking our hands off that and just be rather than do. And then, just as Natalie's saying, you know, then there's more awareness of what's happening rather than the pressure and the momentum to produce something. Yeah.
I think Sabbath is a place of rest and personal growth, when we can not give but to receive, to listen ourselves and to become more mature. And if we have no conditions to create, it's just very plain creation, what we are what we can produce. So Sabbath, I think, is very important half of our creation life.
Thank you for the thought about the Sabbath, Bob and Aimee. In a very strange way, lockdown has been like a Sabbath for us.
Mhm.
Because before that, we were so busy traveling, you know, packing, unpacking, getting on a ship, getting off a ship, getting off an aeroplane. And suddenly we couldn't go anywhere. We were at home. And out of this, the Lord has really opened our mind to new projects. And we've had 3 projects going, which has totally astonished us. So thank you for that thought.
Good. One of the things that Sabbath does for us is a sense of completion of the week before. One of my practices is to clean off my desk on Friday morning, so I go to Sabbath with a sense of closure. Even though my work is not done, it's closed for a day. And then I come back from Sabbath with a fresh start. And so there's a looking back in gratitude for the work I was able to do, and a looking forward in anticipation of what work God is going to give me in the week to come. So there are many things that show the wisdom of God in modeling Sabbath and in commanding Sabbath. So we have learned that that's really a blessing and a gift to us. We're just wrapping up here, and then we have some questions for you to share around. Let me see if this one will come up. Some of you are familiar with this concept of spiritual direction, consolation, and desolation. In most simple terms, consolation are those things which are life-giving or draw us toward God. Desolation are those things that are life-emptying or depleting, and in a sense draw us away from God. And in art, these are probably the 2 main life experiences that fuel our art, whatever medium we're dealing with. And so just our growing realization that it's important to pay attention to consolation and desolation, and be honest with it. If it's life emptying, to be honest with it and with God, and if it's life giving, to feed off of that and to grow with that.
Yeah. So I shared that in many ways, art is an expression of the stuck places in my own life. It's not always the desolation places. Sometimes it is spontaneous expression of beauty. I am clearly in this, you can tell, a beginning artist, and I'm humbled to even put this up. But what this is an expression of is a place in my life where I was trying to describe what was going on. And God was inviting me to a place of growth. And so I was growing and expanding. But what happened was it had to do with starting this counseling center that I have started here at our church. But what happened was I left my job of being specifically ministry, doing pastoring, things like that, and was moving back into the counseling realm. Well, about halfway through the process, I realized that I kind of wish I hadn't done that I wish I'd gone back to what was familiar. And I wanted to go back, but I knew that I was already on the journey to where God had invited me to the next place. And so I described it as being like a hermit crab. You'll see this little crab in the center. Hermit crabs leave the home that they're in because it's gotten too small, and they have to make their way to the next shell to find their new home. And my children, when they were younger, had a hermit crab in a little plastic terrarium, like a little container, and they would watch this poor crab make its journey from the small shell to the bigger shell. And when that crab is doing that, it's kind of naked and it's in process. And so I was describing to somebody I was in counseling, I feel like that very crab. I'm moving from the small space to the next space, but I feel exposed. I feel vulnerable. I feel like I'm not really sure the journey is worth it, but I'm already on the way, and I'm trusting that the next home I find is where I'm really going to again find that peace and rest. And so this was just a visual expression of that journey from a smaller place to the next place, and I call it the in-between places, which is spoken of in scripture. But anyway, that's just an example of how God has brought art to express things that my words can't actually usually put into practice.
So we're not sure about the time left, but we thought that these are questions that you can ponder and, if desired, to have a conversation about together that kind of summarize some of our learnings. Are you exploring any new art forms, or would you like to? In what ways have you shown hospitality by sharing your art? What has that been like? And then in what ways does your art tell your story, relating to the consolation, desolation matter, I suppose? How does your art tell your story? So keep those in mind, and I'm going to stop share here, and let's talk about, I mean, this is really kind of personal, and I know a lot of us don't know each other, especially we're newcomers to you all, but I think it's helpful to talk about where our art is helping us become the people God has created us to be, helping us connect with the story that He's writing in us, not only as artists, but as humans and as followers of His. And He's writing a story in every one of us, and we're all growing and learning. So let's, to the degree we can feel comfortable, just share how is God using art to tell your story, or how are you growing and exploring, and those kinds of things.
Or also, how is hospitality? How's your art been a means of hospitality?
Yes, maybe I start off with an example to how is art telling my story. I'm actually a musician and a writer, and a year ago I wrote a long short story about 75 pages, all in German, which was more or less like a summary of the past 30 years of my life, with all the ups and downs in ministry, and it all centered around a place which is like a cave of inner yearning, of meeting with God. And it contains many personal things and hints and examples. And the only person who really understood the story and all the details was my wife, of course. So, but now it's quite interesting to give this story to other people and have them read it, and then read or hear how they interpret the story, not knowing that this is more or less my life story, or a story about a significant part of my life, which again helps me to understand the laws of interpretation on the one hand, and it also helps me to reflect more how to use symbols, and also to reflect what I actually wrote in the story about my own story. So I don't know whether this makes sense, but this is really my story reflected in the story, and then get it back reflected from other people. This is a very interesting experiment.
I love that, the hospitality of learning from those who read your story and interpret it. It becomes a message back to you. Mm-hmm. And it's like that Swahili proverb, "Please, stranger, come and be my guest, that I may be healed, that I may know myself better."
Well, I can share one funny story. I'm a visual artist, but also I am a performer and work with video art and so on. But Well, recently I was just like kind of complaining to my friend that it's kind of getting boring for me, and I want something more interesting like to happen in my life. And well, she was saying that basically don't be so dramatic. And then I received the email where from this theater festival where they invited me to perform, and I was like, please, I'm an actor, I have all the skill of drama, and they invited me to go there with this project technology. So it is installation, and it has this like sculpture of this like post-human robot carrying a cross. It's kind of talking about the technologies and spirituality, and basically about like one artificial way to create eternity for yourself with, I don't know, technologies and like through Jesus and so on. And for huge canvases, like it has Jesus and the lamb and like everything. And I also was like kind of trying to understand what is the shape and form, how I gonna like worship God. And since I came from this like very like interesting underground scene, well, it's not that I'm like playing guitar and just like simply singing. So basically I asked my friend musician to create a soundtrack for me. And it's kind of sounds like a bit like techno, and then I'm like singing, like praying in tongues on stage and dancing. So this is my way of trying something new.
Oh, good. I can see your excitement with it too.
I'm so happy. Yes.
That's great. That's that childlike exploring and discovering something new that's life-giving. It's great. Someone else, pick up on any of the themes that God has been touching you with in this hour.
For me, my art has simplified because of COVID, because I have long COVID. So it means that I can't move very much because of energy levels being very low. So it has reduced or changed the boundaries of art for me. So now it can only happen on a small table and on a piece of A4 paper, and with a pencil or a pen, not paint, because I can't stand for long enough. So it's just really interesting that the restrictions are the start of creativity, because that's all that you can do. So it has to be contained, which is a gift, and I found it a gift, that the boundaries have changed and the parameters are smaller.
Place where it's actually in the desolation that you feel that sense of that longing to express what God is doing in that dark place. It does it. It brings things in, but I just find it interesting that he is in both, that he does not leave us, and we, in the narrowing, we sometimes become more clear about what's going on in our world, and in our expression. Good. Thank you.
When we make, or when others make art in those places of desolation too, it absolutely is an act of hospitality for others to give themselves permission, to be, and hope for what's to come.
I'd like to ask a question maybe of some of the musicians who are here during this time of great restriction. Have you found that it's been a time for your creativity to blossom, and you've thought new thoughts, and you've created perhaps new works or new approaches? I know that there are at least 3 professional pianists among us, but I know there are other musicians as well. How's this working for you?
I'd like to share something, please.
Go ahead, Linda. Yeah.
Well, we've been unemployed for about a year, and it was actually an opportunity for me to write. And I found myself going back. It's interesting, Bob and Aimee, that you talk about consolation and desolation. In my writing, I found myself going back to a time when I was actually thrown out of a church. It was a huge. I lost my faith. I walked out of the church, thinking I don't know if there's a God anymore. I have no idea what this faith is like. So I've written about 2 or 3 times now. I still find it difficult to send it to anybody, but maybe I will one day. So that's been an interesting time. So thank you for the thought.
Wow. So sorry that happened to you. It's admirable that you've been able to go back to that. This is something Aimee does in her work to help people go back to difficult places and try to observe where God was. Was he absent? Was he looking the other way, or was he actually there in ways that we didn't see at the time?
I take no credit for the healing. It was God that, led me all the way. And the result was that I met Robert at the end or the beginning of that new journey. And it was, that it was not, it was a very painful time, but God intended it for my best. I can say that hand on heart. So thanks be to God.
Amen. It reminds me of that C.S. Lewis quote from the beginning of our time, that Christianity is like the sun in that it is that by which we see everything. But there are those seasons where there's an eclipse and we're not seeing things through our faith because the light just is blocked. But over time, this is a common human experience, we've all experienced this. We've all looked back at times where there was an eclipse and we couldn't see clearly, but God in his grace over time does bring the light, even a little peak of light at first, but he does bring light and lets us look back and see with clarity what good he wants to and is bringing out of those dark times. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. And Bob and Aimee, we want to thank you for encouraging and blessing us today, for sharing your journey. And I am very, very thankful for this as well. And thank you for coming. And I didn't tell all of you that Bob was the best man in my wedding. He was young and I was skinny. And 44 years ago.